Hello and welcome to the Bucket Lister podcast. Join your host Keith Crockford, along with special guests who have travelled the world, here to share stories of their adventures and plenty of inspo to add to your bucket list. Now, let's get into today's episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. I am your host, Keith Crockford, and today I'm continuing with our FAQ season where I'm talking about the most asked questions on certain trips. And we've done Everest Base Camp, we've done Kilimanjaro, and today I'm going to be looking at Machu Picchu, which is one of our most popular treks, and we send between the three different routes that we offer at the Bucket List Company. We send away so many people every year on this amazing trek, and we get plenty of questions asked into the office, and I get asked on trips as well. So it's a great one to cover off today. The other special thing about today is that actually it is our 2-year anniversary of the Bucket Lister podcast. So this is episode 104, which means every Wednesday for the last 2 years, I have managed to put out an episode of the Bucket Lister podcast, which for me is amazing because, like with anything, to try and keep something going every week is really, really difficult. And it's probably the one thing that I've only ever managed to do in my business life where I've kept something going that I've said I'm going to. So I'm super proud of the fact that this is the end of season 2 of the Bucket Lister podcast. So that's great news. And we will be back and continuing with season 3 as well, as the podcast is growing with plenty of new people listening all the time. So that's great to hear. I'll apologize today for the state of my voice. I've literally just come back from a trip to Gozo, and there was a little bit of a bug going around, and I thought I managed to stay away from it. But as I got to the airport on the way home, my throat started to hurt and the cough came, and I kind of ended up succumbing to the bug that was going around, which, like with anything, whenever you go on a trip, aeroplanes are the worst breeding ground for any kind of bugs. And I think one of the group must have picked something up, and I thought I got away with it, but unfortunately I didn't. So anyway, never mind that. If I have to cough during the episode, I am very, very sorry. But let's get on with the episode. And today we're going to be looking at, like I said, at Machu Picchu and some of the most asked questions that we get on Machu Picchu. Now, we've done other episodes before on Machu Picchu. We've looked at all the different treks and said which one people should choose. So again, in the show notes, I'll put up other editions of the podcast as well. So if Machu Picchu is on your bucket list, then you can go and find out more in depth into the different treks, etc. Because I'm only just going to quickly whiz through the top 15 questions that we get asked in the office on Machu Picchu. So first question is, how long is the trek to Machu Picchu? And that's really dependent on which trek you are going to do. Now, obviously, the trip itself is not just a trek when you go with the Bucket List Company. So our trips range from kind of 11, 12, 13 days in total. The trek themselves, though, obviously we offer 3. We offer the classic Inca Trail, we offer the Salkantay, and we offer the Lares Trek. Now, the classic Inca Trail is about 42 kilometers, and that one spans over 4 days. The Salkantay Trek is typically done over 5 days and is approximately 74 kilometers, so a lot more on the Salkantay Trek. And then the Lares Trek, as we always say, is the easier trek out of all of them. And that one covers about 33 kilometers and is generally done over 3 days. So it is possible to do a shorter trek. You can do a two-day Inca Trail, and that one is about 11 kilometers if you want to do that. So obviously you can go to Machu Picchu without doing any trekking, but a lovely way of doing it is to trek to Machu Picchu. So if you're not much of a trekker, then you could also look at the shorter option as well and do the 2-day Inca Trail if you wanted to do that. Altitude of Machu Picchu then. the altitude varies on the treks, and it's one reason why the trips in general are a lot longer, because you spend 2 days in Cusco prior to starting your trek to make sure that you are properly acclimatized. And Cusco sits at around about 3,400 meters. Now, Machu Picchu itself is 2,430 meters above sea level. And the highest point on the Inca Trail is the Dead Woman's Pass, which sits at 4,215 meters. That's the lowest altitude you will go on all of the treks. So if altitude is a bit of a question for you, then the lowest altitude on any of the treks is on the Inca Trail. The Salkantay Trek, you'll go over the Salkantay Pass, and that sits at approximately 4,600 meters. And then the highest point you'll reach on the Lares Trek is 4,400 meters. But the nice thing about the Lares Trek is you hit that altitude on the first day, and then you spend your time going downhill from there. So, it's not like you're building up to it. You kind of get it over and done with, and then you lose the altitude quite quickly on the Lares Trek. What's the best time to go on these treks? Well, we run all our treks between May and September, which is the dry season in Peru. It's really important to book in advance, because it is the best time to trek, and there is huge demand, especially on the Inca Trail itself. The rainy season is generally from November to March. This makes it very slippery. I mean, obviously the trail is generally on a cobbled path, as in the Inca Trails themselves. So it makes them really slippery. And February is the heaviest rainfall, which you can't do the Inca Trail in February, because every February it is closed for maintenance on the Inca Trail. So if you're looking to head out and go, May to September are the best times. Look at May, look at September, look at the shoulder seasons, because it gets a lot busier June, July, August. So just have a think about that when you're going. Obviously, the Salkantay Trek and the Lares Trek aren't as busy as the main Inca Trail Trek. But if it is the Inca Trail Trek you really want to do, then you want to be thinking about booking it way in advance, because as we've always said before, permit-wise, there is only 200 permits issued each day for the Inca Trail. And then another 300 for all of the support staff that go. And once the permits have gone, the permits have gone. So don't rock up in Cusco thinking, I'm going to go and do an Inca Trail Trek next week, because the chances are there won't be any permits left. So just think about that when you're planning your trip. What level of fitness is required for the treks? Obviously, as we say on all of our trips, again, it is a trek. You can put one foot in front of the other. But the fitter you are, the more you are going to enjoy it. Obviously, you are trekking at altitude, which is difficult anyway. For a lot of people, they won't have experienced that altitude before. So going into it in your best physical shape that you possibly can is what we advise. There are lots of steps on the Inca Trail, more so than people even realize. And that's generally what kind of hurts most people. So think about doing that with your training, like getting on a stepper, getting on a stairmaster, a climb master, getting used to walking up steps and down steps, because actually what kills most people on the Inca Trail is actually the steps coming back down again, because they are all very different heights. It's not like walking down the staircase. Some of them are really big steps. So really consider that in your training if you're preparing to go out. There's less steps on the Lares and the Salkantay, but there are a lot more steps on the Inca Trail itself. A lot of people ask about altitude sickness on the treks. And obviously anything above 3,000 meters, you can experience altitude sickness. Now, as I always say, as long as you are taking it nice and easy and, you've acclimatized in Cusco prior to, you shouldn't have a problem with altitude sickness. However, you will get effects of being at altitude. So, having a headache or being nauseous or having a lack of appetite are all common symptoms and effects of being at altitude. And these will generally happen to you. You'll experience it generally straight away as soon as you land in Cusco, because most people will fly from Lima up to Cusco. So you'll go from sea level at Lima up to 3,400 meters, and you will really feel that soon as you touch down in Cusco. And just wandering around Cusco, you'll feel out of breath. You might have a little bit of a headache, and that is just an effect of being at altitude. It's not necessarily altitude sickness. And that is something, you don't really need to worry about. As long as you're taking it nice and steady, you're acclimatizing properly, you're drinking a lot, you're eating a lot. Altitude sickness, although possible, is very uncommon. But like I said, you will have effects of being at altitude, which is different to altitude sickness itself. Another question we get asked is a guide mandatory for trekking to Machu Picchu? Now, again, this is dependent on your trek. In 2001, the Peruvian Ministry of Culture made it compulsory that on the Inca Trail, you have to have a guide, but it's not compulsory if you're doing the Salkantay or the Lares Trek. Although, as we always said, having a local guide and understand, having someone there to point out the historical and the cultural context to you is super valuable when you're on these trips. So although it's not mandatory to have a guide on those two treks, I would still advise you get one, because they will give you a lot of information and know the best place to camp and all of those things. So with Machu Picchu itself, you used to be able to buy a ticket and have a wander around yourself. But again, this has changed recently. And now you do need to have that a local guide to take you around Machu Picchu itself. Now, a lot of the trekking guides are also able to then take you into Machu Picchu. So, the guide you have for the trek will also be able to guide you around Machu Picchu as well. What essential gear will I need for the treks? Obviously, at the Bucket List Company, we provide you with a kit list. We've done packing videos for all of the treks. So all of that information is given to you prior to going. There is a weight limit for the porters to carry, which is generally 10 kilos on the trek. But obviously, again, you're not trekking for a very long period of time. You'll need a good pair of shoes, pair of boots to do the trekking. I would certainly recommend ankle support for any of the treks, rather than more of a pair of trekking shoes. A good layering system is important. You'll always need to have a set of waterproofs with you. Obviously, you're walking at altitude, so sun protection, sun cream, sun hat, all of those things are really important. Generally, a lot of the camping equipment will be provided by your tour operator. Like ours will provide sleeping mats, the tents. You just need to provide a sleeping bag and a pillow. And again, some trekking companies will also provide you with a duffel bag as well to put everything in. So all the duffel bags are the same size and you can't overpack them. So again, not a great expensive kit list for any of these treks. So just consider that when you are going out. But like I said, at the Bucket List Company, we'll provide you with everything, and I'll put links to those videos in the show notes as well. So if you wonder what you need to pack for each of those treks, you can go and check those videos out. How can we protect the environment? Now, obviously, this is a big question with the Inca Trail. Obviously, it gets walked. Like I say, there's 500 permits a day. So they are very thoughtful at the minute on the impact on the trail itself, and also on Machu Picchu as well. They're constantly changing the rules in Machu Picchu of where you can go to make sure that it is being protected, because just that footfall of people walking around is obviously having an impact on the trail and on Machu Picchu itself. So obviously you should always, if you're in the outdoors, practice the leave no trace principle. So making sure you're sticking to the main trails where you're supposed to go, carrying out all your rubbish, not leaving anything. And on the Inca Trail, for example, in your trekking poles, you have to use the plastic bungs on the bottom of your trekking poles, so you're not having the carbon hitting the trail. And that's one of the rules, for example, that they've put in place, that you need to have the plastic bungs on the bottom of your trekking poles for that reason. Another question we get asked is, how would you rate the difficulty of each of the treks? Now, we've gone into more detail on this, and like I said, I'll put a link to the other podcasts we've done in the show notes for this one. So just head over to the show notes after you finish listening to this one, and it will give you some more information on each of the treks in more detail. The Inca Trail and the Salkantay are rated as moderate to strenuous if you look at their ratings, mainly due to the length and the altitude, and then the steps and the challenging terrain, really. So I would say, for me, the Salkantay Trek is the hardest trek out of all of them. The Inca Trail sits in the middle, and then the easiest one of all of them is the Lares Trek, just because it covers a shorter distance, but also allows that closer interaction with the local community. You get more time spent just kind of learning and listening and visiting local people and being invited into people's houses. So it's not that constant trekking all the time that you might do on the other two. Can I find food and drink along the trail? Can I buy snacks? So obviously in your trip itself, you'll be fed. And I think, we say in the office that actually the food on any of the Machu Picchu treks is probably the best food you will get fed on any of our trips around the world. I mean, how they manage to cook what they do on the mountainside is just absolutely amazing. So you get fed really, really well. Having said that, there are very few shops on the way. There are a few on the Lares Trek. As you're walking through, you've got the possibility. On the Inca Trail, when you get into the camps in the evenings, locals will come out, and you can even buy a beer. There is nothing on the trek on the route on the way, but there is the option in the evenings to buy things once you get into camp. And on the Salkantay Trek, there are a few villages that you walk through where is the option to get stuff. Obviously, the water is available from the streams all the way along. The guides will purify water for you or boil water for you, but just make sure that you've got purifying tablets with you, or that you actually take a water to go bottle or a filtered bottle with you that you can top up when you can. But there are plenty of streams along the trail where you can top up. So that's the important thing of having that filtered water bottle with you. So actually you can fill up whenever you want. Obviously in Cusco, you can buy your snacks and things like that before you head out on the trail. So if you want anything, get that in Cusco. Or quite often, a lot of tour operators you'll stop for breakfast on the first day of the trek. You might leave early and then stop somewhere, and there'll be the opportunity to get some more snacks there, like near to Aguas Calientes or somewhere like that. Another question is, where do we stay on the trek? For all of the treks, the Inca Trail, Salkantay, and the Lares, camping is the common option. On the Inca Trail especially, there is designated campsites. There are no other options for you on the specific Inca Trail. If some operators on the Salkantay and the Lares operate using homestays in local villages, that's not what we do. We are still camping, but those options are available to you if you want to do it. So, but for all of our treks, they are all camping. Generally, the tents are nice, big and spacious. You'll also have an eating tent as well, where you kind of have your 3 meals a day in the eating tent. And then the crew will also have a cooking tent as well, where they'll prepare everything for you. And that's generally how the camps work. Obviously, on the Inca Trail trek, you are camping amongst potentially a lot of other people in the evenings in the campsites, whereas on the Lares Trek or the Salkantay Trek, generally you are camping with your group in a much smaller area. And there is nobody else on the trek. I mean, I've done the Lares Trek 3 or 4 times now, and I've never ever seen another group camping anywhere near us, apart from at the Lares Hot Springs at the end where everyone kind of meets together. That's the only place I've kind of seen other groups at the same time. So if you don't like being around lots of other people, then the Salkantay or the Lares treks are potentially the ones for you. Another one we get asked a lot is people want to take their children. What's the age limitations on the trek? And actually, there are no explicit age restrictions on the treks. There are no rules that state people must be over 10, must be over 12, like there are on Kilimanjaro, for example. But saying that, obviously, due to the altitude and due to the difficulty, just consider your child and how young they are and what their experience is before making that decision. But obviously, age limit wise, there are no limits to adhere to. So you can certainly take children on the trek without any issues, as long as you feel that your children will be able to cope with the distances and the steps and etc. And again, there are no upper limits. We've had, people in their late 70s, early 80s do a Machu Picchu trek with us at the Bucket List Company, who have managed it, very, very well and really enjoyed it. So, you can certainly do that. Do you need to trek to Machu Picchu? And obviously the answer to that is no, you don't need to trek to Machu Picchu. Thousands of people visit Machu Picchu every day without trekking there. You can basically, again, start your journey from Cusco, get the train to Aguas Calientes, which is the little town at the bottom of Machu Picchu. And then you can get the bus up and have your day tour in Machu Picchu, or your half day tour in Machu Picchu, and then come back down and then train back out. And like I say, thousands of people do that all the time. But from our perspective, obviously being an adventure company, we want to do it the adventurous way and do it with a trek. So that's why we do it the way we do it. But like I say, there are plenty of people who do it. But just remember, as I said earlier, you do need the guide to take you around Machu Picchu. You can hire these outside. There are guides touting as soon as you get up that they'll show you around. But I think it's far better to have organised that in advance if you're thinking about doing it. And then finally, the question that everyone really, really worries about is, what can I expect from the toilet facilities on the trail? And the easiest answer to that is not a great deal, to be honest. On the Inca Trail itself, they have basic toilets at the campsites. Obviously, on the Salkantay or the Lares Trek, you are not staying in official campsites. So a lot of tour operators will provide portable toilets with portable toilet tents, which is what we do on all of our treks. So even if you are on an Inca Trail trek, there will still be a portaloo in a toilet tent for our group near our camp. But they are not the best. We'll just put that out there now. With the local toilets, the pit toilets. So, the portable toilets offer you that little bit more, I would say. But you'll need to take your own toilet paper with you. And obviously the most important thing is making sure you've got your hand sanitizer as well, to make sure you're not picking up any bugs whilst you're on the trip itself. So that's super, super important. Well, that's the main questions that we get asked on Machu Picchu. Obviously, there might be more questions as well. And if you've got any questions on Machu Picchu that I haven't covered off in this episode, then please do send your questions into the office and we will be more than happy to answer your questions for you. Like I said, all the episodes of the podcast relating to Machu Picchu, I will put them in the show notes, so it's easy for you to go and find them if Machu Picchu is on your bucket list. And that will give you a lot more information. I've also written the ultimate guide to Machu Picchu, which covers off all of the treks in more detail. And you can go and download a copy of that. It's like an 80-page guide. And again, I will put a link to that in the show notes. So if you're interested, you can go and download a copy of that. But that's it for this episode. That's it for season 2. We have now completed 104 episodes of the Bucket Lister podcast, and I will be back next week with season 3, episode 1, and another episode of this podcast. So hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you found it interesting. And like I say, I'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, thanks very much and goodbye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. Be sure to click follow to be alerted for next week's episode. For more travel inspiration, check us out at www.thebucketlistcompany.co.uk or follow us on socials. See you next time.